My name is Jane Laskey. I'm the museum manager of the Senhouse Roman Museum in Maryport. The collection in the museum actually dates right back to the time of Elizabeth I, when John Senhouse of Netherhall started to collect objects from his estate. He was aware that there was a Roman site on the estate because it was actually recognisable as a fort and a civilian settlement. This collection itself expanded with every generation of the Senhouse family, till at one point it became probably one of the most significant Roman collections in the country. There was a move from local people, but also academics, that this collection should be on public display. So there was a drive in the 1980s to find a building. The naval battery was essentially derelict at the time. There was no roofs, the floors had been burnt out, there was no doors and windows, but it was an available, and it was a big building as well, with big spaces inside to make a really good museum. And there's a lot of negotiations with the Navy to acquire it, but eventually the Senhouse Museum Trust acquired the building. They spent 5 years converting it, putting the roofs back, putting the windows and doors back in, making this great space that it is, and then moving the collection in. The museum opened in 1990, so over 30 years ago. And we've, over the years, we've refined the interpretation, we've built upon the community engagement, welcoming hopefully lots of local people in who can get into the museum free. Anybody in the CA15 postcode can get into the museum free. We've built our learning programme, so we've welcomed lots of local schools. We've got this great volunteer-led learning programme. The teacher books a day visit to the museum. But that is not just, they don't just visit the museum. Our learning coordinator will then contact the school to have a conversation with the teacher about how we can make that visit the best visit they can get here. We can incorporate bits of maths, art, science, technology, and so we develop a whole day around what the school needs, where they work with the collection, they understand the collection and what it tells us about how the Romans were living here, but also the local people as well. We have quite a lot of native sculpture here, probably more than in any other Roman museum. Also, we do a really, really lovely session around life in the temple, so that the young people can learn how the Romans worshipped their gods, what the significance of those gods were. We want this museum to be accessible to all, and we want people to engage with the museum and the collection in a way that works for them. We've worked with autism groups on the coast to almost audit the museum and what we offer to people, how we can make small changes to make it more accessible but also more friendly as well. The collection itself is really special in the academic world. It's considered to be of international significance, particularly the Roman military altars and what that can tell us about the Roman military presence here. Troop movements, size of garrisons, we actually have named people here that can then be traced elsewhere in the empire. So essentially a lot of what is written academically about the Roman army in Britain is influenced by our collection. But it's not a static collection, we haven't drawn a line and this is what we know about the collection and we are not going to find out anything more. We're constantly finding out new things about the collection. Like, for instance, the recent excavations, originally Humphrey Senhouse found 17 Roman altars buried. We had one understanding about that then, but 5 years of excavation has almost completely turned that on its head to a much more sort of practical interpretation that these amazing Roman military altars were being treated just as big lumps of stone to support a much later building. So that tells us something about what the Roman attitude was to these objects. So don't think that once you've visited the museum you don't need to go back, because we are always incorporating these new understandings and these new stories into the way that we interpret our collection. We want to know what excites people about the collection and get their stories, their understanding, but also the stories of the collection as well, because we have a lot of people in Maryport that remember the collection in Nether Hall, remember the Senhouse family at Nether Hall, and we would love to know what people's memories are of that and what it meant to them as well. You know, was it just a collection that you weren't allowed anywhere near, or was it where you were welcomed by the Senhouse family? I hear about things like garden parties at Nether Hall, where the townspeople in Maryport were welcomed to the estate, and they had carriage rides, and the kids played in the gardens. We want to hear about that, because that is going to disappear. The museum is also a tourist attraction. It is in the Hadrian's Wall World Heritage Site, which is designated by UNESCO. It attracts a lot of visitors into Maryport from all over the world. We get Australians, we get Americans, we get Canadians. These people are being attracted to Maryport because they visit the Roman Museum. They've heard about the museum and how important the collection is. But then also they spend the day in Maryport, and we do send people out to see what else Maryport has to offer. The overriding feedback that we get from people who are visiting the museum in Maryport for the first time is they didn't realise how fantastic it is.